Today's Martin Luther King's birthday, and I have a very interesting story around it something I just discovered. Hi, I'm Doug the Barefoot Adventure, and this is I'm looking over at my sign, day 16 of my 1,000-day adventure. Today is a day that I always remember a time back in my life. I was 6 years old, and my mom took me down to downtown Washington, D.C. to see what was going on there. And what was going on was Martin Luther King was giving his speech. I remember back to that time, and the one thing I really remember is as we were walking towards the Capitol Mall where this was happening, I remember hearing the song "We Shall Overcome." You know, everyone was singing as we went there, and that's really all I remember, because I don't really remember the speech, because when we got there I just remembered, it was just massive people, and you could see the Lincoln Memorial just way off in the distance, and with the sound system back then I'm sure I couldn't have heard much of anything. I always thought I saw something else during that time, and what it was was Shantytown. And so today I went and I looked online and I found a picture of the Capitol Mall and the massive amounts of people there, and all of a sudden I started looking at things and they weren't right, because here's a picture of the Capitol Mall when Martin Luther King gave his speech. Now, here's a picture of what I remember. Now, the big difference is, if you look in the water, there's a lot of people there. And if you look off over to the side, there's structures there. What I realized tonight is I actually witnessed two different events about 2 years apart. The second one was the March in Washington, D.C. I know it had to do with civil rights, and it was a march for Martin Luther King, who had been assassinated, I believe, by that time. I'm just looking at all the history right now, and I just discovered the two times. Where it's really interesting is, now that I can see the difference, for some reason Mom kept taking me around. She wanted me to see this thing with Martin Luther King, and then for some reason she took me down to Washington, D.C. We went down a couple times to see what was going on, and I'm not sure what the interest of my mother was. What we were going to see was, we lived about 10 miles away, and we were up on this little hill, and we actually could see the city of Washington, D.C. flames. There was a glow coming from the city, because along with the march they were having riots down there. And so the next day or so, Mom packed the kids, my brother and I, up in the car, and we went down to Washington, D.C. And I remember seeing Jeeps driving through the streets with the machine guns on the top. I remember going down, one street churning, and you seeing people breaking out a window and pulling stuff out of the window. That's when we went down to the Capitol Mall again, and we were driving. And it's becoming a little more clear now that I'm putting the, events separated. And that's when we saw all of the people. They were living there, because it was a 2-week experience that this was happening. They were there to, get their rights. I remember very well the problems that were going on, the segregation, discrimination, just flat out racism that was going on. You go down to Florida and you see the billboards for the White Knights, Ku Klux Klan. Yeah, I saw that during my times in Washington, D.C. It was a major thing. So yeah, I saw Martin Luther King give his speech. And 2 years later, I saw another massive march on Washington, D.C. And it's interesting right now in the news, we have, another confrontation. 3 groups came together, and so now the entire nation is split because depending on which camera you looked at. So it's like, have we really gone that far in 50 years? So something to think about. Definitely I learned a lot today. So that's another one. Take care. Talk to you tomorrow.